What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Late Night Tackle Tuesday. I'm Hunter Sutherland with LS Lures, and tonight we're going to be shooting from the hip a little bit, all right? Normally, you know, we pick one subject, we really break that thing down, but tonight we're going over 5 tips and things that I think are super important, stuff that we haven't talked about in a little while, and 5 things that are going to absolutely get you more bites in 2026, make you a lot more confident with the jig, boat you a lot more fish, and just make you a generally happier guy, you know? Like I said, we get comments all the time saying, I don't know how to fish a jig, I don't like fishing a jig, I don't have any confidence with a jig. But if you do these 5 things, I promise you, you're gonna get more bites, you're gonna catch more fish, you're gonna have a lot better time on the water fishing a jig, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and dive into these. Make sure you guys like and subscribe, and thank you so much for being here. Guys, number 1, we're talking noise and distance, okay? It's something that I feel like a lot of guys get super lazy about. You know, it's really easy to go through the motions, get out there, roll right up onto what you're fishing, you know, make a bunch of racket and stuff like that. And like I talk about, I harp all the time, fish are getting smarter, all right? They're getting more beat up. There's a lot more fishing pressure, and anglers are getting better every single day. So all the little things that you guys can do make a big difference, okay? And the first one we're gonna be talking about, guys, is the distance that you stay from your targets and the noise you make once you get up onto them, okay? So first and foremost, distance, guys. It's gonna be a lot more important in cleaner water, okay? The clearer the water is, the farther those fish can see and the more skittish and spooky they're gonna get, you know? A lot of guys try and talk about like, oh, you have to downsize your line, you gotta downsize everything needs to be super finessey, and that's true, and that's great. But one thing a lot of guys don't talk about is quit rolling up on your dang fish, okay? Like, the further away and the farther the cast you can make, the absolute better in cleaner water, okay? When those fish can see forever, if they see your boat, if they see your trolling motor and they've been hooked in the face 5 times, they start to learn, okay? I saw it a bunch of times this year, fishing brush piles in some different clear water spots I have, where if I was within 30, 35 feet of that brush pile and I made a cast to it, they weren't biting, okay? I'd be lucky to catch one, and then there was nothing else happening in there. If I stayed over 30, 35 feet away from that sucker, and I made my longer casts and I just kind of kept my distance a little bit better, I could catch them out of it all day long. But the second, you know, I spaced off, I drifted too close, it was over. It was time to move to the next one because they were not going to bite. They knew what was up, the jig was up, it was over, all right? So if you guys are fishing clear water, be very mindful of how close you're getting to your targets, because if they can see you, most of the time, they are not gonna bite you. Second one's gonna be noise, guys, all right? Whether you're a bank fisherman, whether you're in a boat, a kayak, whatever it may be, one thing to be very mindful of is going to be how much noise you're making, okay? Now, this is more important in dirtier water, okay? The distance isn't as important in dirty water, okay, because they can't see anything. But when you're up shallow and you're getting really tight on that cover, don't go stomping around in your boat. Keep that trolling motor turned pretty low and really pick your way through that stuff, you know, because if your trolling motor's too loud, your graphs are making a bunch of noise, you're stomping around, you're blasting music and stuff like that. Sometimes it doesn't matter, but sometimes it really does, okay? And when you're getting around those really big smart fish that are dirt shallow, okay, you want everything in your advantage, because if they know you're there, they're a lot less likely to bite. So first tip, stay quiet, keep your distance. Be very mindful of what you're doing, okay? Think about things before you do it. How am I gonna approach this? How far away am I gonna be? Because you can't catch them if they know you're there and you're making a bunch of racket. So just think about that stuff and you'll have a lot more success with the jig. Number 2, guys, is going to be changing your retrieves, okay? I don't care if you're dragging, casting, flipping, doing whatever you're doing. One thing that I think is super important when you're fishing a jig is constantly changing your retrieves until you figure out exactly what they want, okay? So when I'm rolling up to a laydown or a piece of structure that I want to fish, you know, I always start off pretty fast. I'll fire that jig in there, let it hit the bottom, and I like to do like 3 or 4 quick pops, let it hit the bottom, and work it back like that the whole time. That gets those active fish. It's a great way to be very efficient. But after that, after I make a couple casts like that, I start changing my retrieves, okay? Most guys, they get in a rhythm where they're like, this is how I like to fish a jig, this is how I'm gonna fish it, and they'll fish it the same way for hours, right? And they say, oh, they're not biting a jig. Well, sometimes they just want it a little bit slower, sometimes they want it faster, sometimes they don't want it to do anything, okay? So change those retrieves, okay? Make your first cast pretty quick, make your second one just really slow, dragging it back. Put some really big hops into there, dead stick it, try everything, okay? It doesn't take any extra time to rotate those different things, but what you're gonna find is by doing that on individual pieces of cover, those fish are gonna tell you what you want, and you can really hone in on that one technique for the rest of the day until it changes again and you stop getting bit. But instead of going for 3 hours doing the same thing and saying, I don't know why they're doing that, you can pretty much figure out exactly how they want it right off the get-go and catch a lot more fish because of it. Number 3, guys, is talking about jig weight baits and trailer selection, okay? One thing that I'll say, we could talk about this all day. I can make a whole video about it, but one thing to keep in mind this year is that the bigger, flatter, wider, more appendages your trailer has, okay, the slower it is going to make your jig fall, okay? So it's just one thing to keep in mind when you're fishing a really light jig. If you want it to sit on top of that grass, or you want it to fall really slow and just kind of sit in their face, throw a bigger, wider trailer, okay? If you want that jig to get to the bottom really quick because you don't want it falling slow, do not throw a trailer that's got 4 different arms off the back and all that stuff, okay? But you can play around with this a lot. You can do a lot of different things, guys. But one thing to always keep in mind is if you want that jig to fall slower, put a big bulky trailer on there with a lot of appendages. If you want it to fall faster, get more of that reaction bite, throw something that's a lot more streamlined, doesn't have as much drag to it, guys, and you'll be a lot more successful, okay? Like I said, we can make a whole video about that, but it's one thing to keep in mind based on what you guys are doing and how fast you want that jig to fall. Number 4, boys, is going to be soak that freaking jig. I know we talked about it a little bit earlier about changing retrieves, but one thing I really want you guys to mix in this year that I think is super effective and that I caught a lot of fish and a lot of really, really big fish this past year doing is doing absolutely nothing, okay? A lot of us, again, like I said, we get in our rhythms and we do our thing. But one thing I noticed this year, guys, using live scope and watching some of these fish react to the jig is that once they get on it, they don't want it doing anything, okay? And I don't know what that is. I don't know why that is. You know, a lot of us, we get in our rhythm and we just hop that thing, we let it sit, we hop that thing, we let it sit. But one thing this year that I noticed is that a lot of those fish, when they really get locked on that jig and they're just sitting there looking at it, they don't want it to move, okay? It's almost like when it's moving, it gives them a reason to go, it's not really worth my time. And they go off and they do their thing, right? But when it's just sitting there and your trailer's sitting there and the skirt's doing its thing, it almost really, it's like playing chicken with them, okay? So one thing that will get you a lot more bites is just mixing in some dead stick pauses, okay? Whether that's 10 seconds, 20 seconds. I waited as long as I could on some of them for 30 or 45 seconds before they picked it up without moving that dang thing, okay? So do not be afraid when you guys are out there to be mindful, work that jig off to the edge of a laydown or whatever, and just let it sit, okay? Watch your line, look at a bird, talk to your buddy, do whatever, but just mix them in every now and then, because you would be amazed at how many fish are following that jig or see that jig and come over to investigate it, and you just keep hopping it and they just lose interest, okay? So mix in some of those really long, uncomfortable dead stick pauses and you will pick up some fish, and you will pick up some really big fish that are just too lazy to go chasing that thing. And last but not least, boys, it's another trailer one. When you're flipping wood, the flatter, wider trailer you can go with, generally speaking, the less times you're going to get snagged, all right? A flatter, wider trailer is going to prevent that jig from rolling because it's, like I said, it's wider and there's a lot more surface area on the bottom, okay? With a really thin trailer and stuff like that, it's really easy for that jig to roll one way or the other when it's coming up over cover. But the wider that jig trailer is when it comes up and over, it creates sort of a buffer, all right? Yes, it does make your jig bulkier, but if you guys are getting into brush piles, if you're getting into really gnarly laydowns and stuff like that, throwing a wider trailer like a beaver, like a Strike King Rage Bug or something like that is going to help you guys snag a lot less. It's going to keep that jig from rolling as much, and it's going to keep you unsnagged and a lot happier, because the less you're snagged, the more time that jig's free to catch fish and the more bites you're going to get, guys. But that is all I've got today, dudes. Like I said, we're keeping it very simple in this one. It's Tackle Talk Tuesday. We had to get something out for you guys. So here are 5 tips that I think are super important. We haven't touched on them for a while, guys. So if you found those helpful, make sure you guys like and subscribe. Comment down below what you guys think is really important, what you want to see in the future, something that you like to do that you think is kind of unique and creative and whatnot there. And we'll see you guys next week for another Tackle Talk Tuesday.